Hi, Well Property Women. Well, it's been about 4 weeks since we first started this journey, which started out just as simply a cup of coffee with Leon and Peter to introduce the two guys, and now we're full steam ahead. We're in the stage now where Peter has brought together the consultants. Now he's acting as the project manager in this project. Leon's a visionary and obviously the director and the person that founded the project. And then I'm putting together the corporate structures, the funding and the finance. So we've all got our roles to do. We've not actually signed anything as far as their agreement goes, but that will come. If you can't do a deal on the handshake and the level of understanding of each other, then you shouldn't be going into a formal agreement either with those people, because it's a bit like a marriage. You're in it for a while. Even though this has got an exit strategy that's only about 2 years away, you hope that you can go on and do a lot more business with each other. So being in the same place of values, integrity, those sorts of things is really important. So I've been working with the lawyers, Leon's lawyer, who I've never met, and also my lawyer, just to work out between them what the best structure is. Now there's a couple of reasons that we want to really drill down on. That is, when you're bringing anyone into a deal, whether it's a joint venture, whether it's some capital raising because you need some extra money in the deal, you need to think about that structure from two different angles. Well, three really. First of all, we've got Leon, who's going to be the director of the company, so we want to make sure he's protected and his other assets are protected. We also want to make sure that anyone coming in is protected in their position as well, whether that be through a unit trust, shareholders agreement, unit holder agreement, deed agreements, whatever sort of agreements and structures we need. But there's also this third area that we need to consider, and it's probably just as important, because the bank or the lender that we use will be looking at who's in that structure, and they will be wanting to drill down. So we need to make sure that we can actually get the funding that we want for the reasons that we want it, but also protecting everyone that may not want to be a party to the actual guarantor of that lending. So there's a lot of important things to think about there, and that's why I work really diligently with lawyers and accountants to make sure we've got the right fit. But getting back to the practical side of delivering this development, we're going to now meet with the guys who, it's not just Peter and Leon and myself in the room, we actually get an engineer in and we've got a town planner in as well. And so we consult on a weekly basis now, and that's one of the things you need to be doing, is keeping your finger on the pulse, making sure that all things are happening. Well, we've got Peter as our project manager, and he's certainly making sure we've got the agenda laid out. We are going through and working through all the different areas that need be consulted with. You've got to make sure too that we're all on the same page, and there's nothing gonna, like a nigger in the woodpole, is gonna suddenly jump out at you. So here we go, the number 3 meeting with the consultants. So we'll see what the boys have to say today. Okay, so Leon, I noticed that it's a 2007 DA approval. So what's happened between, that's a long time ago. What's happened since then?
It is a long time, and I mean, there was back then there was a different planning scheme. There was different there was no Unity water, for example. There was a whole lot of different hurdles that the guys had to tackle in getting it through, and they did a good job getting the DA. But the reality is they then extended it multiple times, 3 times now, and we're probably pulling the trigger today on lodging an extension again to secure up that position, make sure the DA is still valid for a while. So the reality is, I mean, things have changed to a degree. Best practices have changed in road design and engineering. We're going to try and use those to our advantage in part of the minor change layout. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's what the site has a DA, it's approved, which is great. But with the extensions and with the time that's passed, we think there's opportunity now with some changes to access to services and things like that. That we'll get a better outcome on. Sure take on that.
So Leon, just before we go over to Peter, you had a couple of consultants working on this already.
Yes. And
so tell me where they were at and what was going on there.
So I did. I had a town planner, I had engineers mostly doing a lot of the legwork. Really, this site, the major issues are engineering constraints. There's slope and there's access to infrastructure that we need to shore up. So I'd done a fair bit of legwork, trying to come up with a new lot layout that took advantage of the topography better. Didn't clash with some of the features of the site that we need to retain. There's a large tree there we need to retain. There's valleys and gutters and little overland flow areas down the bottom that we need to be aware of. So much of it was trying to get an engineering perspective on how best to sort of understand the risks, come up with an improved design, an improved outcome, make it more cost effective, and really the big thing was just to mitigate potential issues that are going to be deal breakers. And I made a fair bit of progress with that. Obviously, you try to employ people that are smarter than you in their fields. You build a mastermind. And now we're at a point now, starting to move forward more rapidly. Obviously Peter's involved. Peter does this all day, every day, project management. He's all over it like a rash, for lack of a better word. But he's not saying anything, Peter. But look, it's great because we, bringing in some other external consultants as well. There's next level stuff that we need to do now. Getting environmental stuff sorted. Checking bushfire concerns, all sorts of things that we need to really try and get a real handle of. And now that we've got time and due diligence to really do this properly, tick off it's a bit of a tricky balance between, especially as I've been working on over the last couple of months, between you want to tick off the biggest issues first. You don't want to just spend $50,000 on DD without spending $5,000 on something first that could be a deal breaker, but you've got to wait for that response. So it's a bit of toing and froing, back and forth, coming up with things, but we're definitely making progress moving forward. And it's having the team, that circle wide and bringing guys, and especially Peter doing having another set of eyeballs all over this, sanity check on where I was at with things. It's been brilliant. So.
And your challenge has also been that you're working on several other projects at the moment.
This is true. Several other quite a few. So it is. And look, that was always the intention for me, to actually bring someone on board to PM this to a degree, and it's just it's happened quite serendipitously, as it happens, and it's great. So
cool. Yeah. And so Peter, now you've come on board. What were the first things that you were sort of highlighting, I guess, in your mind?
I guess I was ironically familiar with to a certain extent the history of this site. It's a site that I had looked at a high level in the past. So straight away I was of the understanding that it had substantial engineering constraints, I guess is the best way to put it. Specifically slope. It's probably the key thing, especially with any or most railway towns, especially Nambour. The site has.
And when you're saying slope, we mean steep slope.
Very steep slope, above 25%. Things that you struggle to walk up, sand dune type slope. So I guess that in itself is a constraint and an opportunity. It can provide lots that have great vistas and views, but unless the fundamental, I guess, engineering consideration of the site looks at how you can achieve an efficient road and lot layout, your civil construction costs go, they're astronomical, and just mean that the project is not feasible. So my first consideration was really understanding as to where the consulting engineer working on this was at, what he hasn't considered, especially because there's an existing approval on the site. It actually adds a level of complexity as opposed to a site that isn't approved, because we have to have regard to what the existing approval says, not just the current legislation, policy, best practice and those sort of things. So apart from slope, the site has a trunk water main that traverses the site that we can't touch, so it needs to be contained within future road reserve. There's high voltage power lines that need to be undergrounded. There's ecological considerations around the flatter parts of the slope, the site. There's an existing tree that can't be touched, so there's the whole raft of competing interests. There's bushfire constraints with lots, future proposed lots that might adjoin an existing council reserve. So there's a whole raft of competing interests that need to be balanced in order to achieve a lot layout that provides a good saleable product, but also a product that can actually be built in a cost-effective manner.
So if I was doing this on my own, you've just done my head in. Is there a logical process that you're going through in your mind? And I noticed that you actually brought the consultants in, you sat them around the table so that everyone could get on the same page as step one.
Yes.
From there, what did you see in your mind needed to happen?
In my mind, the key thing for subdivision projects is having someone that has carriage of the layout, someone that ideally has extensive experience in doing subdivision layouts. And at the point in time that I was involved in the project or became involved, the civil engineer had carriage of that layout. I guess my key concern was that the engineer was very very skilled at civil engineering, but didn't really have regard to other considerations that might impact that layout. So from my point of view, it was identifying the gaps, the existing gaps in the consultant team, and bringing in other external consultants and other technical input into the project.
So was roads one of those things? Give
roads,
us an example.
So external traffic is a prime example. So the civil engineer had spent a lot of time on the existing site layout, reconfiguring it to get it as a most cost-effective layout possible. But he hadn't actually reviewed the existing DA in relation to external road upgrade requirements. So I contacted a civil engineer I know who's quite apt at traffic engineering, and he's reviewed the external road requirements with the view of trying to understand if the existing approval or the conditions of the existing approval need to be met, or if there's been various road upgrades that have occurred since that approval was issued and now that mean that we don't have to then spend money on external upgrades that we would have otherwise have to budget for.
So how's this helping with our timing? What do you think it's doing? We're talking about time, the topic is time in and out of the market. So obviously we want to hit the market while it's hot. So what do you think that the impact of what you're doing is going to have on that?
Ultimately, I'm trying to accelerate the time frame between now and when we modify the existing approval. We'd lodge that application with council. Without wasting too much time on technical input, without having the right technical input, we could have an application lodged with council that could sit with them for maybe 6 months, and we could be back and forth negotiating a whole raft of things without spending the time now to address the fundamental technical issues of the site and the existing approval and those conditions. We could be spending a lot of money to then lodge something with council that just is not palatable to them. So ultimately I'm trying to have a very comprehensive engagement process with the consultant team to produce technical output that we can then present to council, engage with them on a collaborative basis, so that when we come time to actually change the approval, we know what we're getting, we've costed it, we've done market analysis of that layout, our feasibility is proven up at that point, and we know that council is largely accepting of what we're proposing to change, so that we get the approval, we've ticked that box. We then quickly progress through to financing, pre-sales, and hopefully a fairly seamless construction process.
Awesome. And Leon, one of the big things I've noticed is that your communication with the owner has been imperative to this. Obviously, wouldn't have got extension to the due diligence. You've also getting a lot of other information. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's generally the case with most sites. If you have challenges, if you can work with the vendor, prove to them that you're a real human being and a person trying to, get an outcome, not just someone at the other end of their solicitor's emails. You tend to get a better result, and I actually was fortunate to get an introduction, asked for a little bit of help. She offered, I got a phone number, I spent an hour and a half with her on the phone the other day and walking through the whole process, the site constraints, the issues we're up against, the time frames and stuff that we want to do. We want to pull the trigger and do stuff. We, sort of dangle the carrot with paying for the DA extensions and things like that. And it's a bit of a win-win, a little bit of it's a little bit of a game of chess with them. But it's you're trying to do the right thing by people. And I think generally, if you can do that, you can show your intentions are there and you be transparent, to a degree that makes them understand it and feel comfortable with it. And you often can get the outcome where they get on your side, and that's been the case here. You guys have seen the emails back and whatnot. I mean, the vendor or the one controlling the stakes at their end, has been very helpful. She's sending through all sorts of information. She jumped on the phone the other day after our conversation, called Department of Natural Resources, got some more info, bushfire overlay stuff, had it sent through and passed through back. She's now actively on our side helping. I mean, we've been exchanging emails with her in the last couple of days, and she's cracking the whip at her end to help us out now. That's how it seems. And it's just come through. We've just got, in the last hour, we've had the extension request approved. We've got a whole heap more time up our sleeve, and we can start pulling the trigger on things with a bit more confidence that we've got that. So.
And that extension was for?
19th of June, due diligence.
So we've got 12 weeks.
12 more weeks. We were due Friday, which with the public holiday was Tuesday, so we've gone from 2 days to 12 weeks essentially, which gives us a whole heap more breathing space.
Absolutely brilliant.
Well, moving forward, we can do it now. So,
Cool.
Yeah, cool.
All right.